Well, let's now take a look at how the markets have been performing throughout the week. And we're now joined by Maurice Odwar, who is the investment manager at Saiton Investments, to just take us through business throughout the week. Now, we know that Kenya and China have signed a double taxation avoidance agreement to make sure that both countries do not hurt from double taxation, Chinese being double taxed here and Kenyans being double taxed in China. Those are among some of the issues that we want to tackle, but also looking at the fact that we have seen the election being extended yet again to the later part of October. What does this mean for the economy? Does it hurt the economy? Well, let's now join Maurice Odwar, who is at our City Center studio. Thank you so much for joining us, Maurice. To start with, of course, I guess I will start with the immediate, which is the fact that the presidential election has been moved to the 26th of October. That is in October, this year, rather. Does this affect the economy further? Because what we saw was when we were given the Supreme judgment the first time, the NSC dipped by about 100 billion shillings, which is about $1 billion. Even though it was recouped days after, we still see that the political impact is quite huge.
Thank you. If you look at the performance of the investment environment so far, especially since the nullification of the presidential election results, there have been sort of like a slowdown in terms of how market is performing. NSC losses that were come as a result of this have not been recovered yet. And also you've seen, though market is still trying to move edge a little bit higher, but they have been slowed down. Seem foreign investor participation has slowed down. And even if you look at all this in totality, when you take all these impacts into economic growth, we are likely to record slow economic growth in the year 2017. We are likely to come even below the 5% historical growth that we've been achieving, mainly because of even attention has been diverted to politics, and now the economic activities have taken sort of like a backseat.
All right, so we have seen different sects and analysts giving divided opinion. Some say the economy has not really been affected by the political mood, while others say, you know, the economy is suffering as a result. But from where you sit at Saiton, especially where you do a lot of research, what exactly are the numbers looking like in the economy?
Because, Joy, if you look at politics, definitely affects our economic performance and economic growth. Because if you look at now, the key spending unit in an economy is government. Government currently not spending. They are limited spending mostly in terms of processing payroll and such like only. If you look at, again, NGO that, again, control funds a significant part of the economy, again, have already slowed down in terms of what they are doing. So if you look at, put all these in totality, most banks are not even also lending as a result of interest rate cap. If you look at the contribution of financial services sector, look at even the drought that you are currently, look at even the performance of the cultural sector, the spending, government is not spending. If you put all this together, definitely will impact economic growth. And that's why we are saying it's likely that we are going to record economic growth that are going to become below 5%, if you compare both the 5.8% that we did last year. So in totality, politics is something that we can't ignore, because even the key policy decision makers are also sort of like affected by the ongoing politics.
All right, so you mentioned something to do with the interest rate cap, and the Central Bank of Kenya says they want to push for the review of this interest rate cap law. Recently, we spoke to Njomo, who is the Member of Parliament for Kiambu constituency, and he said there's no way the members of Parliament are going to allow this to happen. They waited 20 years for banks to discipline themselves, and this didn't happen. And so the interest cap law comes in handy, because unless this happens, or unless we are in the current situation, then we cannot see banks self-disciplining themselves. But from where you sit, do you think it's now time that they now review the interest cap law? And when banks say they're hurting, how much of this hurt actually is genuine, or is it just about the profits?
If you look at the effects of interest rate cap so far, as we've now been having the law for 1 year, we've seen the performance of banks reducing in terms of the bottom line, but that's not the main issue. So the main issue is the main aim for this bill was to ensure that there's credit growth, accessibility to credit, and what we've seen, the law has achieved the opposite. you've seen private sector credit growth slowing down to about 2% from a high of about 25% in the 5-year highest point, 25%. So if you look at the main driving force behind relooking at this law, is not necessarily because banks are suffering, but the main thing is because there's no credit flow to effect that can spur economic growth. If you look at all this, one of the negative effects of this is that it has really totally paralyzed the performance of the MPC, because it's really there's nothing that they can do given this law, and also given the metric that they usually look at, there's nothing that they can do. That's why they even maintain the MPC, the policy central bank rate to throw the better part of this year 10%. But if you look at now where we are going to, the bill needs to be relooked at because the credit is not flowing, which will definitely affect economic growth. But from where I'm seeing that, given how this law came into effect, was more local, like coming from like a political, it was more political. And again, we are likely now to review, but not doing away with the law. I'm seeing a situation where we just have to play around with the metrics, but not repealing the law totally.
All right. So there's this argument that, you know, with the rate cap law, it's been a plus for borrowers especially, and a majority of whom are, let's say, middle-income Kenyans. And they say that now banks are getting innovative to attract more customers to their side by coming up with products such as them giving out interest-free loans. And these are packages that if we didn't have you know, the rate cap, this kind of product innovation could not have come up. What do you have to say to that?
If you look at the banking sector where we are, they have no option other than to be innovative in terms of how they offer their services and the different products that they give out to their customers. But if you look at the impact of this law, it's really the key, the people that are really suffering as those middle income group that this law was meant to protect. We're looking at a situation where now this middle income, especially SMEs, cannot fit within the current pricing framework of 4% above the policy lending rate. And that's why we are saying the initial objective of this law, it has failed to achieve. Going forward, we need to look at it. And how do you look at it, given where this law came from? It's going to be a long process, even in terms of the review. But given how banks have also been operating historically, we are looking at a situation where now the policy decision makers will have to play around with the metrics so that to give banks a leeway to give leeway how to can price in even some risky individuals that will again now spark credit flow into the economy that will lead to better economic growth and performance of small and medium enterprises.
All right. Let's now shift gears to a signing that was made yesterday on double taxation avoidance that was between Kenya and China. China happens to be one of the lead investors in terms of infrastructure and, of course, leads in imports into the country. But let's talk more about the double taxation itself. Just about how much of Kenyan businesses are affected by double taxation, and we're not just talking about the trade between Kenya and China, but overall.
If you look at the Kenyan trade flows from a number of countries that are affected by double taxation, we are seeing Kenya still don't have double taxation treaties with most of countries that they trade with. It's a good step what they have done with China, because most of African countries are now looking towards the east, and we go towards the east. China is the main destination. Look at the population of China, again, provides better market for most of African commodities. Given that African countries, and especially Kenya, we are more sort of like, we produce most of raw materials that are needed most in the Chinese economy. So double taxation treaty is a good step that what we've done with Kenya, because we will still enhance trade flows between these two countries. Things that we're also importing from China, things that we're exporting to China will improve between the two countries. But again, we need now to move fast and again look at which other country that we have significant trade flows between us and them, so that we get in double taxation agreement, so that we provide an essential platform for Kenya now to move sort of like to become a net exporter country as opposed to being current net importer that we are. So it's a good step in the right direction, and now we need now to expand that to cover most of the other countries, especially the Commonwealth countries that are not in double taxation agreement with.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Maurice. We do appreciate the time taken to talk to us about some of the latest developments in business this week. Maurice Odwar is the investment manager at Saturn Investments. Thank you so much. Let's now take a short break. We'll be back with more business. Do stay with us.